Hello, all of my lovely artists. This is your friendly neighborhood art teacher, Miss Asbury, and today we are going to do a project that celebrates Black History Month. Now, Black History Month, as I'm sure you know, is celebrated in February right alongside Valentine's Day, and especially in art class, we use it as a time to celebrate Black artists. And just like in music class, we use it to celebrate Black musicians. But in today's art project, we are not going to celebrate just one person. We are actually going to celebrate an entire town of people, and we are going to be talking about the small town of Gee's Bend, Alabama. In Gee's Bend, they are a community mostly comprised of African Americans, and they are famously known for their amazing quilts. So this is my quilt square that we are going to use as an example for today's project. Now, their quilt squares, though famous now and really loved by so many people across the world in museums and exhibits, they were originally made out of necessities. And what I mean by that is that in this community, their ancestors way back when were people who were formerly enslaved. And after they were freed, they were still not treated kindly. They were still not treated right as equals, and that is not okay. But because that happened to them, they had to use whatever limited resources they could to keep their families warm in winter, which is why for their quilts, they had to use any scrap of fabric they had, such as old suits, clothing that children had grown out of, old ratty blankets, to make their quilts to keep everybody warm. But the designs they used, the way they made these, ended up looking so gorgeous that that's why they're loved today. And we're going to talk about that. So the first thing you need is a square of paper. Use whatever you have, it doesn't have to be white, and we're going to talk about how to make it into a square shape, which if you've seen any of my previous videos, especially if we're talking about origami, you already know how this is done. Take your upper right corner of your rectangular paper, and you're going to start by folding it diagonally like this until the bottom edge of your paper lines up, and your lower right corner becomes a point like this. And we're going to go ahead and make a crease. So now we have a rectangle and a triangle, and all you're going to do is cut off that extra rectangle. And then once you unfold it, you will have a perfect square. Now for mine, to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to actually start with a black square of paper, because that's what I like to work with to make my own quilt. In my in-person learning, these students are making a bunch of these, and I'm stapling them together to make one huge paper Gee's Bend quilt. And that's why it's going to be so important for you guys to turn these in as pictures. So if you take a picture of your own quilt square like this, I can maybe take all of the pictures and collage them together to make a virtual Gee's Bend quilt, and that would be so incredible. Now, when you are making your Gee's Bend quilt, you don't have to use fancy construction paper. You can if you want to. But just like how they had limited resources, you might have limited resources too, to give yourself a little extra challenge. So, I have some construction paper strips here. I will get out my purple scraps and maybe my red scraps, but I'm also going to experiment using some pretty cupcake liners and an old scrap of Christmas wrapping paper. So we're going to see what happens. I'm going to get all those out of my way and have a seat. Now, the two most important elements of art that we're going to talk about with our Gee's Bend quilt squares are pattern and shape. I don't want to see you coloring on these or drawing on these, because that's not how quilts are made. It's more like we're going to be painting with paper by cutting out different things. Our goal is to cover up as much of our background as we possibly can. So, I'm just going to start. I don't really have a good idea. So I'm going to start with my paper scraps and just start cutting out some skinny rectangles. And I'll be showing you in just a second some examples of Gee's Bend quilts, and you can see why I'm starting with skinny rectangles. And I'm just gonna start arranging them on my space to see what I think looks good. And this is just a lot of playing. A lot of art, as I've said a million times, is just playing around and seeing what you think looks good. All right, so I kind of like that. Now I'm gonna take one of my cupcake liners and flatten it out. And I could probably make some other cool rectangles out of this. Other examples of materials you could use are old books, as long as you have permission to cut them up. Maybe some old Christmas cards that somebody was just gonna throw away. Maybe even some old newspapers, magazines, candy wrappers, cereal boxes. Anything with a cool color or design will work wonderfully. Now I didn't like how that red looks, so I'm actually gonna take that off and use this white cupcake liner instead. So let's see, if I cut this up like that, I could glue it on like this and make something cool. Like that. Make some more rectangles. So you can see how I'm utilizing the element of art, shape, because I'm just using a bunch of skinny rectangles and making a pattern just like that. Now, I could just call that quits, but I like to be a little bit fancier. So, we are also going to be utilizing overlaps. So, what I mean by that is obviously to give our quilt a little bit more of a layering effect, I can add shapes on top of my background pattern. Like I could add some circles like this. It's really smart to go into this project with an idea of brainstorming, because especially the people in Gee's Bend, they would probably cut out all of their shapes first and lay them out on their fabric before they sewed it on, because they wanted to make sure it looked good before they got to the point of no return, because once you sew it on, it's pretty much stuck. So that's looking good. Now I might add some of my red, and I might make, how about some triangles? I think I'm also going to include a video talking a little bit more about the Gee's Bend community from the people themselves, because honestly, they explain it way better than I do. And I've watched these videos before, and it's just so amazing to see how they create and how they have fun while they're creating. You can see these people just chatting around and sewing together, and that just sounds kind of like our art classes, how we just like to talk and create at the same time. It reminds me of how we like to do that all the time, because you always know that I let you talk as long as you're creating at the same time. Alright, so I might mess around with this a bit more, but I'm kind of liking how it's looking, so I'm gonna go ahead and speed through this and speed up my video and glue all this down for you. So see you in just a few seconds. Alright my friends, there is my finished Gee's Bend Quilt Square, and there are a lot of lessons that can be learned out of this. Ooh, I got glue in my hair. Anyway, some important things I think we have to learn from this community of Gee's Bend is, one, art does not have to be made with fancy materials like the right colors of paper or fancy paints or fancy paintbrushes. You can make art out of absolutely anything. All it takes is your imagination. Also, this teaches us that even though life will hit you hard sometimes, that you can always pull through it as long as you keep working hard and think outside the box. And lastly, guys, just be kind. Be kind to one another. It does not matter what we look like on the outside. We all have something worth celebrating, and you can make a new friend every day. And I think by celebrating these people in Black History Month, we can learn how they can overcome hardships of the past and really rise above in the future. And we always need to know that we can always be better. But with that being said, that's all I have for you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. While I'm recording this, it is Kindness Week, so please remember, be kind to somebody else, tell them that you love them, and just be a good person. I love you, and I miss you, and I can't wait to see you again. Bye.